Okay, so this video is going to be just a quick introductory video on how to write a discussion section for your technical writing assignment for, in this case, it'd be for experiment associated with second order systems. Okay, so I'm going to start here on technical report draft 1 link on the course website. Scrolling down to the discussion, and we'll start from there. In this experiment, actually, you were required to compute the time constants for an underdamped and a critically damped second-order system. The two plots that you should end up with, the two figures for your experiment memo, will end up being the two plots linking your experimental data with an analytical modeling of the second order system in order to determine your time constants. So the time constants are really what you're trying to determine. And then in your discussion, you're going to discuss the two figures and the determined time constants from the experimental data that you get from those figures. So 4 steps, splitting your discussion up into 4 steps in order to interpret the results of your experiment. So step 1 would be to write a sentence or two stating whether or not the results from the lab procedure fully support your hypothesis, whether it doesn't support the hypothesis, or whether it supports the hypothesis with certain exceptions. And the experiment handout, you should see what the hypothesis statement is for the experiment. Step 2, it's in a paragraph to identify specific data from your lab that leads you to either support or reject your hypothesis. So it's telling you to refer to visual representations of your data as evidence to back up your judgment about the hypothesis. Step 3 is in a paragraph, use your understanding of the scientific concept of the lab to explain why the results did or did not support hypothesis. So again, the hypothesis given in the experiment handout, and it should show if the hypothesis from, in this case, not the intro, but from the experiment handout was not supported, show how your understanding of the scientific concept has changed. And then step 4, discuss other items as appropriate, such as any problems that occurred, sources of uncertainty, or how your findings compared to findings from other students in the lab, or also suggestions for improving. And also note that any questions in the experiment handouts that relate to interpreting the data should be included in the discussion section. So for this experiment, you should have 1 question to answer. And when you answer that question in the discussion section, be sure to indicate where the answers for those questions, where the question is located. For example, you would do that by putting a sentence here. For example, I have a sentence here that says the thermal conductivity decreased with pressure. And let's say that was a statement to respond to a question in the experiment handout. You would put, and that was associated with question 1, you would put open and closed parentheses with a 1 in there. And that basically is saying that the above sentence would indicate that it was an answer to question 1 in the experiment handout. And also make sure that your discussion section is no longer than 1 page. Okay, so there's the basic setup. Again, there's a link here for more help. It takes you to North Carolina State University's LabWrite webpage. And I'm not going to read through everything, but each step that I have indicated on our course website is here, as well as extra help in learning how to exactly word each step, or how to word the content that you're going to be putting in your discussion section for each step that I have indicated on our website. Okay, so you have that, as well as if you go again to form and documents, there's a few things here that might be helpful. For one, of course, there's the evaluation. So if you go to technical report, draft 1 evaluation, down to discussion, here you can see how your discussion is going to be evaluated. There's 3 criterion. 1, it says it opens with an effective statement of support of the hypothesis. 2, provide sufficient and logical explanation for the statement. So basically that refers to answering the questions in the lab. And then there's also a backup statement with reference to appropriate findings. So those are the 3 parts that the lab is going to be based on. And as well as technical report example, if you look there, open that up and scroll down to discussion. You should see a good example of what a discussion should look like, as well as some notes that help you to basically realize a few things in this discussion that I'll be looking for in your discussion section. So these notes here are meant for you to, for things to take notice of as you read through this. Okay. After you're done with all that, if you go to Technical Report Draft 2, this will be very helpful. If you scroll down to discussion, right here, basically what I have is each criterion listed here. And after each criterion, there is some help to improve upon a discussion that you have already written. So there's the 3 criterion here with some help that gives you some idea about what to do in order to improve the discussion that you've already written. So that's about it. Again, I'm not going to read through everything, but I was just trying to take you through the logical steps as you write it. Technical Report Draft 1 to get started, forms and documents to get how it's evaluated, and then Technical Report Draft 2 to improve upon it after you've already written a draft. Okay, hope that's helpful. If you have any questions, just ask.